Alright, Unit 1.5, taking a look at inequalities. Before we get going, let's look at some things as far as notation and the way they want us to give things. We have two different types of notation they're going to give us or be discussing or coming across, and that would be set notation. So very important to write this down in your notes. We have set notation and we have interval notation. Your answers inside of my math lab will need to be given most of the time in interval notation. And so what we need to review here is that, when is the bracket used and when is the parentheses used? Well, to refresh your memory, when you remember graphing things on number lines, you remember that a closed dot meant you included, and an open dot meant it was exempt, let's say, or it was not included. Let's do was not included or not included. And remember that those open dots and closed dots were basically the difference between a less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and a less than or greater than. So less than or greater than would be used for an open, and a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to would be used for a closed. So to be more specific, we've got this slide right here, and I'll kind of slide it over so you can see it. In this case, if you wanted to hit pause on the video and you wanted to look at this more closely, I think that's just more words and more confusing. I think that this is probably a better situation, and I have a couple examples we're going to look at. So remember, you can always hit pause, go back. If you like something you just saw, you can always hit pause, rewind to that spot, watch it again, hit pause, and copy down what you need. But the point is that if you have open parentheses with open parentheses, that means that you are between, and that means that you have a less than and a less than. And that's what it looks like on the graph. And if you have a closed and a closed, that means less than or equal to, less than or equal to, and you have brackets with brackets. You can have a half open either way, so you could have a less than or equal to on one side and a less than or less than on the other side, and vice versa. And then we have some singular ones also. So remember, you can always come back and look at this page and use it as a reference. So let's take a look at a couple examples here. And so the idea is that you would, based upon what we've seen in the past couple slides, you would hit pause right now and try to copy these down and answer these questions. And then you play and you come back and see what was going on. So in the first one, we have negative 30 is greater than. Well, greater than is going to be a parentheses, so you're going to use parentheses on that one, or you're going to use an open circle. So we're going to go to 30. And we're going to have, and I'm going to start off with an open circle on this first one for explanation purposes, okay? And so then we go to negative 20, and it's one, but this time it's a closed because it's greater than or equal to. So I close that guy in. Now, we know in this case here, because the x is in between, we know that this is a between. And we'll read it here in just one moment. So we know that in this case we're going to be looking at something like that when we graph it. Now when we put this guy into interval notation, the thing I want to make sure we understand is that technically this thing is written in, has poor grammar. Technically you should always put your smaller number first with your bigger number second. And so then when we create our interval notation, we take a look and we see that we have a less than or equal to, that'll be a closed bracket with negative 20, comma 30, and then because we have less than, that will be an open bracket. So I think that's the best way. So now we have our graph and we have our interval notation from our inequality, and that really creates the best model there for us to reference. Okay, on example 2, we take a look at this guy. So if we wanted to write an interval notation for this guy, this would be, remember we can always go back to this previous page and think about this, but this guy right here is basically saying that I have x's greater than 3. So this guy is saying that I'm starting at 3 and I'm going to infinity. So when we come here to the graph, I used the wrong symbol, didn't I? That shouldn't be a bracket, that should be a parentheses. because it's just greater than, it's not including. So when I come here to the graph, that means I'm going to have a parentheses with an arrow coming off of it pointing that way. On the next one, it says x's are less than negative 3. So that means I have my negative 3, it's an open, and I'm going towards negative infinity. And there's an or in between here. So in this case here, we go to 3, we draw a parentheses or an open circle, right? Just like here we can do an open circle and draw it that way. And we're going to go to the left because we're less than. So we're going to go to the left like so. Alright, so that's basically an or. We're not going to come across that very often. Most of the time it's going to be betweens like we see right here on this first one. But that is what an or would look like. Alright, let's do another one. So in this case here, maybe drawing the graph first would help you. So maybe come down here and doing your graph, okay, I've got something at 12, and I've got something at 12. And then in between there, I know I'm between, so I draw it in between. Some of you might be saying, well, man, I'm having a hard time knowing which way to point my parentheses, because on this one, you pointed your parentheses away from each other, but on this one, you knew to point them towards each other. So what I would challenge you to do is draw open circles, and now you can read this inequality. Read this guy to the left. X is greater than negative 12. So that means that I'm going to be starting at negative 12, and I'm going to be going this way. And then you come back to the x and you read it going this way. So you say x is less than or equal to positive 12. So that would actually be a bracket on that, and that would actually be a closed-in circle, but the point is that now I'm coming this way. And so that's a between. Remember we said that if you have a situation like that, that's considered a between, and you know they're always going to be pointing towards each other. Alright, so there's a couple of those, and you got some more of those to practice inside of my math lab. Let me make sure we're good. One more thing in this video I want to talk about, and that was, what if someone gives us interval notation They give us interval notation and they want us to give it as a graph, and they want us to give it as like set notation or as like an inequality basically. Alright, so same kind of deal. Please hit pause whenever you need to, and try to work the problem, and then watch it through, go back, whatever you want to do here. So if we graph this guy, we would take a look, we would draw a graph. I really don't need a lot of numbers on this graph. Some of you will draw more than others. I put my 0 landmark in the middle. I've got my -1, and I've got my +2. And then based upon what we've learned about these different brackets and so forth, I can come here to my graph and I can graph this. So this would be an open circle on the 1, and it would be a closed circle on the 2, and that would be between. We go in between those two. Alright, if you wanted to use parentheses, obviously it would be a parentheses here going towards a bracket right there. On the next one, oh, set notation, my bad. So in set notation, this would be x such that, and then we would say -1, we put an x, and then we put our 2. And then our decision is like, how do we put this? Well, it's always less than or equal to. So because it's open, because we have an open at -1, we just do less than. And because we have closed at 2, we have less than or equal to. And we put our little brackets around it, and there's our set notation or inequality. Next one. So we've got 0. Oops, I went the wrong way. Let's do that. Let's change that around real quick. We'll put our -2 right there. So that'll be our -2. That'll be our -1. That'll be our 0. So we have a closed-in circle on -2, a closed-in circle on +2. Our set notation would be -2 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 0. In this case here, I put 0 on there as a landmark and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, this is going to be positive infinity out here. This will be negative infinity out here. I have an open circle, and I'm going towards positive infinity. So when I put this guy into set notation, this would be x such that x is greater than 5. So it's singular, just x greater than 5. On the last one, if we drew the graph, we got our landmark of 0. We've got a 1. Remember, this is negative infinity over here, positive infinity over here. I have an open circle because I just have a parentheses, not a bracket, and I'm going towards negative infinity. So that'd be x such that x is less than 1. Alright, so that's kind of a quick run through of just set notation, inequality, and then graphing, and you'll have that mixed in inside of the homework.